Tonight, a disaster warning sending shockwaves along the Pacific coast. A 7.0 earthquake striking Northern California, knocking bottles to the floor and doors off their hinges. Here, littering supermarket aisles, making waves in swimming pools.
This is a big one, guys.
And bringing fears of a tsunami.
It wasn't over, in a nanosecond. It kept going and it was building, and you hear things falling.
NOAA issuing a tsunami warning for hundreds of miles of coastline stretching from California's Bay Area to southern Oregon. The potential of devastating flooding forcing evacuation orders in California cities like Berkeley and Half Moon Bay. Residents ordered to move inland immediately.
You take cautious steps to protect your safety. So that's why I'm up here at a high point.
The tsunami warnings lifted a few hours after the quake. Today's quake coming nearly 2 years to the day after a 6.4 struck the same area in Humboldt County. 2 died and several buildings were damaged.
Historically, this point just offshore of Northern California has had more magnitude 7s than anywhere else in the state because we have 3 different tectonic plates that come together there.
Governor Gavin Newsom declaring a state of emergency for the area.
It's another reminder of the state that we live in and the state of mind that we need to bring to our day-to-day reality here in the state of California in terms of being prepared for earthquakes.
This is the Nations Conspire channel. Welcome to today's show. If you didn't hear, a tsunami warning was issued in San Francisco, but never came to fruition. But that doesn't mean that we can't expect an earthquake along the San Andreas fault line in the near future, because they've been telling us for a while that there's going to be a man-made earthquake along the San Andreas fault line as well as the New Madrid fault line. And the headlines that are out there after this major earthquake hit on the West Coast were all about tsunamis. And it's interesting the wording of some of these articles, like the New York Times, who said the tsunami warning in San Francisco felt like a science fiction movie. And if you haven't noticed, movies are preparation for real events. A lot of the things that happen in movies come to fruition, whether you realize it or not. This is a part of sigil magic, showing us these things before they actually happen, wishing them into existence, so to speak. And there are multiple movies that have been released that have shown us a major earthquake occurring along the San Andreas fault line and the New Madrid fault line. We've seen the movie San Andreas starring Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, who I've exposed numerous times over on the website, and The Continental Split, which is a newly released B-level film, which is so unbearable that words can't actually describe it. But the 2 major fault lines in the United States are the San Andreas Fault and the New Madrid seismic zone, which runs from St. Louis, Missouri to Arkansas. And if an event happened, if an earthquake was created, happened along these fault lines, it would lead to catastrophe, tsunamis, continental splits. And of course, they're telling us these things because they care about us. They're telling us these things because the scientists want us to know ahead of time that there's a chance that it happens. Of course, they're telling you these things not to warn you, not so you could be prepared, because nobody could really be prepared for an earthquake. Nobody could really be prepared for a tsunami. They're telling these things to you so that when they happen, you actually believe that they happen naturally instead of something occurring that is man-made, because the majority of people don't realize that they have the ability to create earthquakes. And of course, it sounds crazy to a lot of people because they haven't been taught this in school. Because why would they be taught this in school? Why would they be taught that this type of technology exists in the first place? And if it was in the wrong hands, well, really bad things could occur, because maybe then the civilians would get together and try to make sure that when the government talks about DARPA and talks about secret military patents that they have, that we wouldn't allow them to have something along these lines because it could cause chaos. Now, when we look at Nikola Tesla's earthquake machine and we look at HAARP, we see the evidence in front of us of what they're actually doing, which is heating up the ionosphere, shooting things off of the firmament that could actually cause a catastrophic earthquake. This is reasons that they tell you that space exists and a firmament doesn't. This is reasons that they tell you these sayings like you can't control the weather. And this, of course, is the reason that they continually tell you whenever there are earthquakes, whenever there are bizarre hurricanes, even if the hurricane is going in the completely opposite direction of the jet stream, that they have to tell you that it's a part of climate change. And all of this bizarre weather stuff that's happening is just a part of Mother Nature and carbon emissions. Because if you realize that the government had the ability to control the weather and manipulate the weather, like their documentation says, like, you know, controlling the weather by 2025, well, then you might get suspicious as to why all of a sudden you're seeing all these bizarre weather patterns out there, or seeing things like the northern lights on a day in and day out basis up in the sky, because they're playing with our atmosphere and they're blaming it on quote unquote Mother Nature. Now, you may recall back in October, I talked about this International Shakeout Day, which is a conditioning day. It's conditioning people into accepting an actual earthquake as some type of non-man-made event, that an earthquake is likely to come. And the government did everything they could to prepare you for it. That's why they had things like International Shakeout Day, right? But that's actually not the case. And when places like Missouri, when states like Missouri release articles like not if, but when earthquake concerns along Missouri's New Madrid fault line, and show you how they are running earthquake preparedness drills preparing for a split across the New Madrid fault line, or when we see in San Francisco them telling us things like earthquake preparedness drill set for Oregon coast. Wow, there was tsunami sirens in October and they were running tsunami drills. Well, what this tells us is they're just conditioning you and preparing you for the inevitable. But what your brain will never process unless you come out of the matrix is that these are man-made events, that the people who have this type of sadistic weaponry want to see you dead. And when they talk about depopulation, they're not just talking about injecting you with something. They're talking about causing as much chaos on the surface as they possibly can, which is why you constantly hear stories about how all of these billionaires are building underground bunkers, from Kim Kardashian to Mark Zuckerberg to Bill Gates. But of course, we all know they won't really be in those underground bunkers. They'll all be on a one-way cruise ship to Antarctica, where, of course, all the leaders of the world will be, because the Antarctica Treaty allows them all to be there together, and it's the one piece of land they don't fight over because they all are in agreement. That would be the safest place for them to be if they cause chaos on the surface. And of course, we know there's probably a lot of other things lurking over in Antarctica. But if you haven't seen the predictive programming, let's start there. So we have the tsunami warning. We have people evacuating San Francisco. You saw the news clip. I'm sure you saw it yourself all over the news while it was occurring. Everybody was fearing for it. This is a warning of what is to come. Now, this could have been their attempt to actually make it happen, and they potentially fail, because God is still in control. God is in control. He can stop them from doing these things. But whether that was a test run or not, it is inevitable. At some point in time, we are going to see something along the lines of, well, what we see in these movies.
People need to know that the shaking is not over. We'll get hit again, and it's going to be a bigger monster. The Earth will literally crack open. We'll feel it on the East Coast. I cannot emphasize this enough. You need to get out, and I mean now. If you can't, God be with you.
Come on, we're gonna be late!
All right. Please turn that off.
Is that an earthquake?
A what? Brendan, stop!
Mom, it's Brenda. They've been in an accident.
What happened? Is Eric okay? We just had a major seismic event. The New Madrid fault is the largest on this continent. We're seeing this much activity. It means something way bigger could be on the way. But there's sinkholes, massive sand blows emerging. None of this is normal. We don't pinpoint where and how these plates are slipping. We're looking at a 10.0 or larger in less than 9 hours.
It'll split the entire continent in half. You should call the governor, have her issue a national emergency.
This earthquake will rip apart the entire country.
I cannot declare a state of emergency on a hunch.
Just do the right thing. Look out!
We need to do something.
To confirm the weak spot and to leave the stress along the fault.
No!
We gotta go, we gotta go!
It's too late.
We have to stop this quake. Otherwise, millions will die.
And again, what a coincidence that it hit right there, right along where that fault line is. And of course, they warned you of tsunamis. They tell you of all these things ahead of time with their training experiments and all the drills that they run. But what they don't talk about is electromagnetic warfare. What they don't talk about is weather modification. And what they don't talk about is Nikola Tesla's earthquake machine. They want you to think that all of these things that people like me talk about are insane notions, despite all the government patents, despite all of the evidence that exists that shows that these things do exist and they can actually do this. In fact, we even had the Weather Channel talking about secrets of the earth, man-made earthquakes. Now, in their video, of course, they talk more about fracking instead of talking about how there's actually wicked people who have realized that they can actually do this and now want to use this type of weaponry to their advantage to cause chaos, to cause mass casualties, and of course, to rebuild once they destroy the surface here. Nobody questions what's going on at HAARP and why they shoot all of these frequencies into the air, why they create artificial aurora lights, which of course are more than just aurora lights. They're more than just some thing in the sky that you're supposed to look at in amazement. There's energy up in the sky. There's electromagnetic fields up in the sky, and they're using these things to their advantage. In fact, you may remember the absolute horror show that occurred in Turkey back in 2023. I covered it, and of course, I was quickly removed from the internet. There was a giant cloud that formed in the sky right above Turkey, right before that earthquake hit. You don't hear much about that earthquake, but could you imagine if an earthquake like that hit in America? Now, the reason you don't hear about it is because the news doesn't talk about it. 50,000 people dying in an earthquake? Well, the reason they don't want to talk about it is because a lot of people noticed that cloud in the sky beforehand. And if you pay attention, these things form in the sky beforehand because they're playing in the atmosphere. They're shooting things into the ionosphere, which of course is visible by the human eye right before these things occur. In fact, they even talked about it on the news, which I'll show you in a second, where they were saying, how come these things appear in the sky right before earthquakes hit? But they want you to think it's a natural phenomenon, but it's not. So when Turkey occurred, this big cloud formation in the sky appeared, and then this catastrophic earthquake took the lives of over 50,000 people. And that's just the reported number. We know that anytime they give us an actual number, that we could expect it to probably be double the amount that they tell us. This, of course, came at the same time that Turkey was trying to break away and was going against the orders of NATO, which is really the New World Order. So what a coincidence that must have been. But if you don't understand how this works, here's just a quick little rundown for anybody out there in a nutshell.
A half hour before the earthquake in China, it's called earthquake lights. And that's something that looks similar to the northern lights, and it's something that has happened before other earthquakes, but no one knows what it is, what causes it. It's being studied to see if it could be some kind of warning sign that could be used to predict big earthquakes, but look at that. Nobody knows what causes that.
That's fascinating.
And we've seen reports of those for decades, really, but no one's actually caught it on tape until just now.
In 1983, I did radio tomography with 30 watts, looking for oil in the ground. I found 26 oil wells over a 9-state area, and 100% of the time was accurate with just 30 watts of power beaming straight into solid rock. HAARP uses 1 billion watts beamed straight into the ionosphere for experiments. Picture these strings on the piano as layers of the earth. Each one has its own frequency. What we used to do is beam radio waves into the ground, and it would vibrate any strings that were present in the ground. We might get a sound back like, and we'd say, that's natural gas. We might get a sound back like, we say that's crude oil, we were able to identify each frequency. We accomplished this with just 30 watts of radio power. If you do this with 1 billion watts, the vibrations are so violent that the entire piano would shake. In fact, the whole house would shake. In fact, the vibrations could be so severe underground that could even cause an earthquake.
When HAARP's broadcast array sends pulses of ELF waves into the ionosphere, the waves get reflected back down and pass through the earth and ocean. 3.6 million watts of ELF waves were purposely or accidentally aimed at an already unstable fault line, cause a tremendous earthquake.
What does it take to trigger an earthquake? The right signal coming in when the pressures are already built up and they're at their threshold.
Okay, so for anybody out there who thinks that this is not possible, what do you think that they're doing at these facilities like HAARP? What do you think they're doing when they're trying to get so much energy and fire it into the sky? Do you think that they're firing it into the sky because they want to see pretty lights in the sky and they want to see how nice it looks? Do you think that they're doing this for your benefit? Do you think that the government has your best interest in mind? Or do you think that they're doing this to literally cause havoc and chaos? Because that's what they're actually trying to do. And anybody who tries to create technology like this is beyond sinister. And leave it to your government to take all of this documented proof of an earthquake machine from Nikola Tesla and to burn his, warehouse down, his home down after his supposed heart attack that he had, which was likely with a heart attack machine that the CIA has, to take all of these patents and keep them for themselves. And of course, who was the one who took those patents? Well, it was Donald Trump's uncle, of course. And now we have Donald Trump in power, and you see the connection between Nikola Tesla, the earthquake machine, and everything else, and Elon Musk, whose company is named after Nikola Tesla in Tesla, who are trying to get you to drive in these ticking time bomb electric vehicles. So everything you see going on out there right now with these earthquakes and the tsunami warnings, you can expect more of these things. Now, was this a drill that they ran? Very likely and potentially a drill and not the actual real thing, maybe just seeing how high they could get it up and what type of waves. They need to run these things in real time. Now, they do it out in the middle of the ocean. You might actually even remember last year, I believe it was, where they ran the earthquake simulation in New York City. Because this is what the plan is for the coast. I mean, we've seen the predictive programming and then putting the East Coast and the West Coast underwater. And you could bet your bottom dollar they're not conditioning you with the climate agenda to not use weaponized weather against you. Because they can get away with it the more they condition you into thinking that people like us are conspiracy theorists and that everything that's happening with the weather is science. That way, you won't question any of these things that actually happen. You won't look to the government and say, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Because remember, there are more of us than there are of them. And that's why it's so important for them to have full control over your mind and to continually peddle disinformation, the real disinformation, which is telling people out there that people like me and you are conspiracy theorists. So we've seen San Andreas predictive programming, continental split predictive programming. We've heard the scientists tell us that it's not a matter of if, but when, that we're going to see a major earthquake along the San Andreas Fault and the New Madrid seismic zone. So we can expect those. So when they happen, we're supposed to just do what? Just say, oh, well, they told us it was going to happen. Now it actually happened. And they'll never think that it was actually man-made in the first place because they've told you already ahead of time that it was going to happen, that science told us that it was going to happen. And don't believe any of those conspiracy theories that show you patent and documentation of the government's ability to create and manipulate the weather. Because, of course, if you actually wake up to that, then you actually start seeing everything in full. You start connecting the dots between the carbon footprint, the digital ID, why we're seeing such chaotic weather events and weird weather patterns. Everything comes together. But of course, the alt-right media will not talk about weaponized weather because they'll just continually keep their audience who thinks that they're red-pilled paying attention to things like men dressing as women and vice versa and who could have babies and who can't, while the government continues to move closer and closer and closer to using major weaponized weather events against us, as if they didn't already just do that with everything that happened in the Carolinas and everything with some of the hurricanes we've seen over the last couple of months or so and everything with FEMA and obviously all the lithium stories that are out there. They're already causing it and then not talking about it. We saw it in Maui with the directed energy weapons. So this is actually happening. And if you're not paying attention to it, that's because they don't want you to, because they're not talking about it after the fact. We don't hear anything about Maui anymore, do we? You don't hear anything about Hurricane Helene anymore, do you? All we heard about in the beginning was about FEMA, how FEMA was blocking people from getting in to help actual victims from this tragedy. Of course, we heard a little bit about the lithium stuff. And then what happened? Well, they came out and they created a false flag immediately, right? As they always do. Somebody heard misinformation online. They went down there and they tried to go after FEMA. And everybody says, oh, these conspiracy theorists, it's unbelievable. FEMA's trying to help everybody. Because what happened was people were getting real footage out there of the government actually pushing people away who were actually trying to help. And common sense logic would say, why in the world, if people are coming there with bottles of water, would you turn it away? Oh, because you have to be in charge? Well, of course, because they don't want anybody to see what's actually going on down there. And now you don't hear a peep about it on the news. And if you do, of course, it's to gaslight you with stories about how the victims are only getting $750 instead of people actually realizing that this entire thing was man-made in the first place, and people need to look into weaponized weather, DARPA, the government, how they're trying to use all of these things under the guise of climate change when these are all man-made events. So thankfully, it wasn't a real tsunami in California. Thankfully, the earthquake didn't devastate the way that maybe they had planned, but maybe it was just a drill. And again, how many of these drills are they going to run until one of these go live? I love how nobody gets suspicious when they're literally taking the time out of, weeks and weeks of firefighters and policemen to carry, and I showed the video clip in Missouri in another video where they're pulling dummies out of the ground, right? They're pulling dummies out of 20-foot holes, and they're saying, well, we're going to be prepared so we know what to do when this actually happens. I think if this actually happens, we're all effed, okay? And everybody around these areas are going to be completely screwed. So they're not telling you how to be prepared for it. They're literally just spellcasting on you. When they show you kids underneath their desk and they're talking about tsunamis and earthquakes, yeah, that's really going to help. If an earthquake splits the floor and the kids are hiding underneath their desk in the classroom, that'll help great. What will that do? Get them underground faster because they'll just be sitting on the floor squatting, so to be quicker than them standing as they get sucked into the ground? I mean, it's unbelievable. This is spellcasting 101. This is what they have planned for humanity. We're talking about Satan and his minions. These people are as sinister as it gets. And if people don't wake up to weather modification and weather control, then they're never going to understand how any of this stuff actually works. Because all of this stuff is going to happen. This new world order and everything else is going to happen with all of these bizarre weather events happening around us, like 70 tornadoes happening in the Midwest at a time. All these things that we've got so desensitized to that we just accept it now. Oh, there's 70 tornadoes, right? And we're supposed to believe that this is natural. Oh, there's hurricanes that are going all the way west. They're going the opposite direction of the jet stream that you've told us about. And then when you question it, they go, you don't understand science. You don't understand weather and the wind. Oh, I don't. This is throughout history, all you've shown us is a jet stream. So every time the storm follows the same path. Now it's going the other direction. And then they go, well, that's because of climate change. Oh, okay. And you're supposed to just accept it and believe it. But then when you go back to John F. Kennedy or Lyndon B. Johnson talking about weather modification and weather control in the 1950s, you say to yourself, oh, right, they're talking about it back then, but we're all conspiracy nuts when you have actual presidents addressing weather modification, weather control. Or you just show those documents that I always show everybody of, the government admitting to controlling the weather by 2025. Well, guess what? It's about to be 2025. I thank everybody for being here. Hope you're all doing well. God bless you and your families as always.